Shall we talk Thames Water, which has returned to profit after raising customers' bills by 40% last year? The company's leadership aren't doing badly. Chief Executive Chris Weston is taking home an extra £128,000. His combined annual pay packet now is £1,163,000. Other directors were paid a combined £4.1 million in bonuses. The company's debts grew to £18.5 billion amid ongoing speculation it could be nationalised. Let's talk to business journalist Ian King. Let's just own the fact, Ian, that debt, £18.5 billion, apparently this company is solvent, but many civilians like myself just don't understand how it can be.
Afternoon. It's actually the debt's actually higher than that. It's closer to £19.5 billion pounds.
Okay.
It's got liquidity of £588 million pounds. That will see it through until the final quarter of this year, which is why really some sort of solution to the issues over its ownership is pretty necessary. Fairly urgently. There is an offer on the table from the creditors of Thames Water who want to take the business over, inject fresh equity into it. They'd be writing off some of the debts that they're already owned by that. They'd be putting in fresh equity and injecting fresh debt into the business, and that would put Thames Water on a far more solvent level. But at the moment, that's being held up because the government doesn't really think it wants further details on that. And as I say, the clock is ticking. Bear in mind that there's lots of court hearings that are going to have to be gone through if this rescue by the creditors is actually to take place.
So many people listening will be a customer of Thames Water, and they're almost certainly an unwilling customer because we just don't have there's no option to go anywhere else. And average bills now are £658. And because those bills have risen by 40%, Thames Water is returning a profit. Are shareholders getting money out of all this?
You must be joking. Shareholders haven't received a dividend from Thames Water since 2017. The shareholders have all written down the value of their shareholdings to nothing. And we're talking about some fairly big name investors here, probably one that a lot of listeners will have money with, actually, the university's superannuation scheme. They were a big shareholder in Thames Water. There were a number of sovereign wealth funds, including one from China. All of them have had to write down the value of their shareholding to nothing. So shareholders are getting absolutely nothing from this at all.
Yeah.
And indeed, when the business is taken over, creditors come further up the chain in terms of who gets anything recovered. Shareholders are right down the bottom of the list.
Right. OK. Isn't it interesting, though, that those bodies thought this was well worth investing in? Because they must have thought, there's no way this can lose us any money.
No, and more fool them, quite frankly, because when they acquired the business, they should have really known what the debt situation was at Thames. The reason, under normal circumstances, a company like Thames Water, all other things being equal, is a very, very sensible investment for a pension fund because it has a very, very predictable income stream. It has a very predictable cost base. So it should be, the returns from that investment should be pretty predictable. And as I say, that's what makes them good investments for pension funds, for sovereign wealth funds. But the problem with Thames is the previous owner, which is an Australian investment bank, Macquarie, who owned the business from 2006 to 2017, hocked it up with debt, and that has really got Thames into the situation that it is now in.
So the customers, many of us are really angry today about these eye-watering pay rises for management at this company. Please try and explain how that is in any way acceptable.
Well, if you look at Thames Water in comparison with its peers, the CEO, you could actually argue, is underpaid, Chris Weston. If you take, it's by far and away the largest of the water companies in the UK, as you said in your introduction, some 16 million household and business customers all in. That makes it, as I say, the biggest water company by some distance. But if you look at the pay that Chris Weston has received, £1.16 million over the last 12 months, we'll compare that with United Utilities, where the CEO has just received £2.5 million. Severn Trent, the outgoing chief executive there, Liv Garfield, she was paid £3.3 million in her final year.
But are they better run, those other water companies?
Well, they are run. They certainly look more financially solvent, but in the defence of Chris Weston, all of these problems that he's now trying to sort out were incurred long before he ever became CEO. And you could actually argue on that basis, Thames Water is a far harder business to run than something like Severn Trent or United Utilities. I mean, I know all of the individuals involved. United Utilities and Severn Trent have been very well run companies for a long, long time. They weren't hocked up with debt in the way that Thames Water was by its previous owner. Chris Weston has come in. He's only been in the job for a couple of years, and really he's taken the wheel of a runaway juggernaut. And as I say, it's a much harder business to run with a lot bigger challenges. Operationally, they've had a lot of things to sort out as well. As I say, Severn Trent and United, which are probably the best comparisons because they're stock market listed, so we have a fairly clear indication of what's going on there compared with some of the more privately and more opaque businesses. You could say operationally under Chris Weston's over the last 12 months, they're going in the right direction. Leakage, for example, was down by some 15%. Pollution incidents were down. So a lot of the metrics by which you judge the operational performance of this business, they're going in the right direction.
At some point, there is a really strong possibility that the company presumably will be nationalised, or even I've heard suggestions it will be nationalised temporarily. Could that happen, and how would it help?
Yes. So what happens when a water company breaches the terms of its operating licence is that the regulator, Ofwat, can put them into what's known as a special administration regime. Now, under the way the law is formulated, that would mean that the company would be temporarily nationalised with several priorities. The first priority would be to try and reclaim whatever is reclaimable on behalf of the company's creditors. Well, first of all, the first priority is to keep the taps on and keep the business ticking over and keep it running effectively. Then it's to try and reclaim anything that's recoverable for creditors. And then thirdly, it's to put it into such shape that it can be sold again to another private owner. That is the way that the law currently provides for a business like Thames were it to fall short of its operating licence. So bear in mind, as things stand, it would be returned to the private sector. Now, the big question is, we've got an incoming Prime Minister who's on the record as saying that he wants to take Thames Water into public ownership. And that would probably require a change in the law the way things stand. But that is certainly, it feels like it's the director of travel. I'm not sure it would be a particularly good outcome for the taxpayer, which is why I suspect the Treasury in particular is desperate to see this business, if it is nationalised, only nationalised temporarily. I suspect a lot of people in the Treasury would rather the creditors were allowed to press ahead and take control of the business, because you don't want, bear in mind, we're already running a deficit to GDP ratio of 4% this year. The national debt's already 95% of GDP. You don't want to be adding Thames Water's debts onto the taxpayers' debt pile.
Well, chances are, Ian, that this time next week there'll be a different boss at the Treasury, a different Chancellor. Who do you think it should be? Who do you think it will be?
Well, according to my copy of the Times this morning, Shabana Mahmood is now the front runner. All the guidance previously was that she didn't want the job and she was happy being Home Secretary. Obviously, Ed Miliband has his backers. Until yesterday, he was the clear favourite among the bookmakers. I noticed that Yvette Cooper's run into the slot as favourite now. Personally speaking, you've got several things to come for. Bear in mind, Ed Miliband, the Labour Party love him. The membership loves him. A lot of his MPs love him. They'd like to see him get the job. People whispering in Andy Burnham's ear, I suspect, have said, do you realise how unpopular this would be with A, the business community, and B, the financial markets? And that is something that Andy Burnham has to weigh up. If you're looking for the most market-friendly option, it would undoubtedly be Pat McFadden, simply because he's proved himself to be very, very hawkish on addressing the UK's spiralling deficits bill.
Right, OK. Pat McFadden, Yvette Cooper, Shabana Mahmood. Right, they're all in the running, are they? OK, we'll keep in touch with you on that one. Thank you very much. Oh, just a quick question for you, actually, Ian, from Andy, who says, the head of Thames became CEO knowing about the problems. Now he's getting more money to do the job he applied for. Andy doesn't like that very much. Isn't that a reasonable point?
Well, don't forget that the CEO of Thames Water doesn't set his pay. The pay is set for any CEO's pay is set by the board. It's not as if Chris Weston wakes up one morning and decides, "Oh, I'm going to give myself a 13% pay rise this year." It's down to the board to decide on how well he's doing in his job, whether he's hitting the sort of targets that we've been discussing, most of which he has been hitting, and improving the operational performance. That's a decision for the board. It's not down to Chris Weston.
Although he could turn it down, couldn't he, the pay rise?
Well, he could indeed, but bear in mind, you think of someone like Chris Weston. He's had a highly lucrative career in business. He's not necessarily doing this job for the money. I'm sure he could get more elsewhere, given his track record, given his CV. He's not doing this for the money necessarily. This is a former army officer, so this is a man who understands public service to an extent, and I suspect he feels that he's doing this because he feels he can make a difference and do the right thing and achieve a better outcome for Thames and its 16 million customers, and it's getting on for 9,000 employees.
Ian, can I just ask a question? You talked about pollution getting better and leaks getting sorted. I mean, surely that is because we are paying more as customers. I can't be the only person reluctant to applaud, although I welcome the outcome.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. They have been allowed to raise bills this year, and that is actually why we are in the mess that we're in terms of all these pollution incidents and leakage incidents. Ever since water was privatised, and a lot of people don't really understand this or get to grips with this. You have 5-year regulatory periods that govern the water industry. In all but one of those 5-year periods, water bills actually fell in real terms, and that was because Ofwat made it a priority to keep water bills down rather than allowing water companies to invest. And that's a key point, because if water companies invest, for example, in pouring concrete into new reservoirs, fixing up the network, replacing pipes and so forth, that increases the size of their regulated asset base, and that effectively enables them to pay their executives more, for one thing, because it means they're bigger businesses. Now, Ofwat's priority ever since privatisation really has been to keep water bills down, which it has done in real terms. That's why you've seen this uproar over leakages and pollution incidents, and only now has Ofwat realised that something needs to be done to address that, and that's why the entire water industry has been allowed to increase bills in the way that it has done during the current regulatory period. I should point out, by the way, one of the issues with pollution that, again, doesn't really get much attention in terms of overspills is that the companies in England and Wales are very, very transparent about how they measure these things. On continental Europe, you don't get that same level of transparency. And when you talk to water industry executives and environmental executives, they will say it's probably just as bad in countries like the Netherlands and Germany, but they just don't publish the details.
I'm not sure whether I'm reassured by that or not. Ian, thank you very much indeed.